I know this is a shock, but I had to protect you. My name isn't what you think it is.
Who are you, really? Everything has been a lie.
The wedding day. Everyone talks about it as if it's a fairy tale, the white dress, the flowers, the sparkling lights. But my wedding, mine was different. It wasn't just about me, it was about him. He was perfect in every way that mattered. Tall, composed, impeccably dressed. His eyes, I could get lost in them forever. But there was something unusual, something that I couldn't put my finger on. He didn't speak, not a single word. As I walked down the aisle, I felt the eyes of everyone on me, but also on him. The guests whispered, "How intriguing, so mysterious." And I forced myself to smile, but my heart raced in ways I hadn't expected. I glanced at him, calm, silent, watching. And in that silence, I felt both awe and fear. When the officiant spoke, I watched him nod politely, but not a single sound came from him. Not a single promise, not a laugh, not even a whisper. The silence stretched like the pause before a storm, and I realized this man's silence wasn't just a quirk, it was a message. Every movement, every glance carried weight. When he held my hand, I felt electricity, but also questions. Why did he never speak? Why did no one seem to mind? Did he really understand what this day meant? During the reception, everyone danced, laughed, and toasted, and I tried so hard to talk to him, to hear something, anything. But he smiled, he listened, he never spoke. And somehow that made the room feel smaller, tighter, almost suffocating. I remember the exact moment I felt it, a chill down my spine, the sense that this silence was hiding something deep, something I wasn't ready for. And I didn't know it yet, but that silence was the beginning of a story that would shake my world, a story that would reveal betrayal, secrets, and truths I never imagined. That night, as the hall emptied and the lights dimmed, I watched him leave the crowd behind, silent as ever, and I wondered, for the first time, what he was really thinking, and more importantly, when would he finally speak? Living with him, it was nothing like I had imagined. People dream about marrying a millionaire, the luxury, the parties, the endless possibilities. But nobody warns you about the silence. The kind of silence that stretches through rooms, through days, through your very thoughts. At first, I tried to fill it. Music, laughter, conversation. I told him everything about my day, my fears, even my smallest thoughts. And every time, he listened, nodded, smiled. A hand squeeze here, a slight tilt of the head there, but not a single word came back. I'll admit, it was frustrating. I would ask him a question, waiting for an answer, and the silence would stretch on like a rope tightening around my chest. I began to wonder if he even understood me. Did he feel what I felt? Did he know I was lonely in a house that looked like a palace but felt more like a cage? Friends would visit. I would chatter, trying desperately to include him, to draw him into the conversation. And everyone loved him. "How charming," they'd say. "So mysterious." And I would smile politely, but inside, I was unraveling. It wasn't just the silence. It was the way he seemed to see everything, every little detail, every unspoken thought. It was unnerving. Once I tried to hide my anxiety about a business meeting I had. He just raised an eyebrow. That single look told me everything. He knew. He always knew. And then the whispers started. From the staff, from his friends, from even distant relatives. "He's hiding something," they'd say softly. "Be careful." I tried to dismiss it, tried to focus on the life I had dreamed of, but the words planted a seed. One night, I stayed up watching him in the living room. He was sitting in his chair, a glass of wine in hand, staring out at the city skyline. I wanted to speak to him, to ask him what he was thinking, but the words got stuck in my throat. What would he say? And more importantly, what if I didn't like the answer? That night, I realized something terrifying. I didn't really know him. Not fully. Not even a little. And if I didn't know him, could I ever trust him? Could I ever love him without knowing the truth behind the silence? Life with a silent millionaire wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. It was a delicate dance, one where every smile, every word, every gesture had to be measured. And I had no idea how this dance would end. But I was determined to find out, somehow. The first cracks appeared quietly. At first, I barely noticed them. A glance that lingered too long, a subtle hesitation, a phone call that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. Small things. Almost nothing, but enough to make my stomach twist in knots. It happened one evening. I had been planning a quiet dinner for just the two of us. The city lights were glowing outside our windows, and the soft hum of the wine pouring into crystal glasses set the scene. I wanted it to be perfect, romantic, a moment where we could finally connect. I asked him a question, something simple, something personal, and for the first time, I noticed it. A flicker in his eyes, a tension in his jaw. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at me, and in that long, unbroken silence, I felt the weight of something hidden. "What are you thinking?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. And then he spoke. Not casually, not with a smile or a joke, but in a low, measured tone that made my blood run cold. "What you see is not all there is." Those words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I froze. My mind raced, trying to understand what he meant. Was it about me, about him, or about someone else? Over the next few days, I watched him closely. Every gesture, every glance, every movement seemed to carry meaning I couldn't decipher. I started noticing patterns, the way he avoided certain topics, the way his eyes followed specific people, the subtle way he guarded his phone. And then came the first undeniable sign of betrayal. I found an email, hidden, encrypted, something I wasn't meant to see. It was a message from someone claiming to have influence over him, offering him advice that felt dangerous. Like a hidden hand trying to control him, to manipulate him from the shadows. My heart ached, but more than that, a fire ignited. I realized that his silence, his calm demeanor, wasn't just a quirk. It was a shield, a way to protect himself from people who would betray him. And maybe from me too. That night, I laid awake staring at the ceiling, asking myself questions I didn't want to hear. Could I trust him? Could I trust anyone around him? Was this life I had stepped into really what I wanted? And yet, somewhere deep inside, a part of me knew the silence was about to end, that the first cracks in the facade were only the beginning, because secrets no matter how well hidden, always find a way to surface. And when they do, everything changes. The betrayal didn't come with the warning. It crept in silently, like a shadow moving across the walls of our home. At first, it was subtle. A misplaced document, a hushed conversation in the hallway, a fleeting glance exchanged between people I thought I could trust. But then, it hit me. Unmistakable, undeniable. One evening, while he was in a meeting, I decided to check on some of the business files he had left for me. I wasn't supposed to, but something in my gut told me to. That's when I found it. The first real evidence. Emails, messages, hints of manipulation. Someone close to him had been quietly trying to gain control. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen. My hands shook, my chest tightened. The person I had trusted most in this world, the people around him, were betraying him. And worse, they didn't even try to hide it well. I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't untangle. Fear, anger, sadness. How could they do this? And how could I have been so blind? For weeks, I had laughed, smiled, and pretended everything was fine, all while deception lingered behind closed doors. When he came home that night, I tried to act normal. I couldn't let him see my panic. But he noticed. He always notices. His gaze cut through me, sharp and knowing. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. His voice, for the first time in weeks, broke the tension in the room. And I realized then that his silence had been more than a quirk. It had been a way to watch, to protect, to wait for the right moment. I told him what I had found. Every email, every message, every subtle clue I had uncovered. And I watched him. For the first time, I saw his calm facade slip, ever so slightly. Anger, disappointment, and determination flickered in his eyes. That night, we talked. Quietly, carefully, like strategists, plotting against an unseen enemy. We realized the truth. We weren't just dealing with hidden enemies outside our home. The betrayal was closer than I had ever imagined. People we had welcomed into our lives, people we had trusted, had been plotting, manipulating, trying to control him, and by extension, us. I felt my emotions swirl. Fear, yes, but also a growing fire. I would not sit by and watch him or our life be destroyed by those who sought to deceive us. And in that moment, I understood the true depth of his silence. It wasn't emptiness. It was armor, a shield. And now, we had to fight. But not with anger or violence. We had to outsmart them. The betrayal within our walls wasn't just a shock. It was a lesson that trust must be earned, and that even the people closest to you can be capable of deception. And as terrifying as that realization was, it ignited something inside me. A determination to expose the lies, uncover the truth, and protect what mattered most. The game had begun, and neither of us would back down. After the betrayal came the decision. We couldn't sit back and wait for them to strike again. The people who had tried to manipulate him, to control him, to poison our lives, they had to be exposed. But it had to be done carefully, strategically, without alerting them. We started quietly. Every interaction, every message, every document became a clue. I learned to watch, to listen, to notice the smallest details, the way someone's hand trembled when they lied, the subtle hesitation in their tone, the pattern of their visits and calls. He guided me in silence, not words, but gestures, looks, the tiniest nods. I realized his silence wasn't emptiness, it was precision. Every action, every observation, every move calculated. And now I was learning his way of seeing the world. Together, we pieced things together. Every suspicious email, every secret meeting, every whispered conversation fell into place like a puzzle. And slowly, we began to see the faces behind the betrayal. People we had trusted, people we had welcomed into our lives. But uncovering the truth wasn't enough. We needed a plan, not to confront them recklessly, but to reveal them at the right time in the right way, so that their manipulations would be undone, their lies laid bare, their influence destroyed. We set traps, small ones, harmless on the surface, but designed to reveal intentions. Observations, secret confirmations, subtle tests. And every time someone tried to deceive us, their mask slipped just a little. I felt a rush of power I had known before. Not the power to hurt, but the power to see clearly, to understand, to protect. And with every discovery, our bond strengthened. His silence became my guide, his instincts teaching me patience, precision, and strategy. There were moments of doubt, of fear. Would we fail? Would we misjudge someone? But the thought of letting them win, of letting them control our lives, our trust, our future, that was unbearable. We had to act, and we would. Every night as we reviewed our findings, I could feel the tension building, not just between us and them, but within me. I had stepped into a world I had never imagined, and now I was learning to navigate it. I was learning to fight with intelligence, not emotion. And then came the first opportunity. A careless move, a hint of arrogance from one of the betrayers, and we saw the opening we had been waiting for. It was small, subtle, almost imperceptible, but I knew this was the moment. The first step toward exposing the truth, reclaiming control, and finally dismantling the web of betrayal that had been spun around us. We were ready. The plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. The night of revelation arrived quietly, almost unassumingly. There were no fireworks, no grand gestures, just the two of us, alone in the library. The city lights outside flickered like distant stars, casting long shadows that danced across the shelves of books. I could feel the tension vibrating in the air, like electricity before a storm. He turned to me, his eyes calm but intense. For weeks, his silence had been a shield, a puzzle I could never fully solve. But now, it was gone. Tonight, the words would come, and I braced myself, unsure if I was ready for the truth. He began slowly, measured, each word deliberate. He spoke of betrayals I hadn't even suspected, of secrets he had guarded to protect not just himself, but me. Each revelation was a shock, a jolt that made my heart skip, my mind reel. I listened as he explained the subtle manipulations, the hidden agendas, the people who had tried to pull the strings behind the scenes. Every word illuminated a world I had only glimpsed before, a world of wealth, power, and deception, where silence was the only way to survive. And then he turned to me, his voice softening. I didn't speak before because I needed to understand who I could trust, and I needed to know that you could see the truth with me. My heart pounded. The silence that once suffocated me was now replaced by honesty, trust, and understanding. I realized then that his silence hadn't been emptiness. It had been strategy, protection, and patience. We went over everything together. The betrayals, the secrets, the traps we had set. Every detail fit together like a puzzle finally complete. And as he spoke, I felt the weight of fear, uncertainty, and suspicion lift from my shoulders. What had seemed impossible, seeing clearly through deception, was now real. It wasn't easy. The truth was harsh, unsettling, and at times painful, but it was liberating. The people who had tried to manipulate him were exposed, their influence shattered. And in that quiet library, surrounded by shadows and soft light, we found clarity. For the first time, I understood him completely, not just the silent millionaire I had married, but the man beneath, brilliant, careful, loyal, and deeply protective. And I understood the power of patience, observation, and timing. That night, silence was no longer a barrier between us. Words, honesty, and trust replaced it. The storm of betrayal had passed, and we stood together stronger than ever, ready to face the future with eyes wide open.
After that night, life changed. Not because the world around us had changed, but because we had. The weight of uncertainty, betrayal, and suspicion that had haunted our days lifted, replaced by clarity, trust, and a quiet sense of victory. Our home, once tense with unspoken fears, now felt lighter. Conversations flowed naturally. I no longer felt like I was navigating a minefield with every word. He spoke more freely, not just because the silence was gone, but because the bond between us had deepened in ways I never imagined. We were no longer just husband and wife. We had become a team, partners in every sense. Every decision, every plan, every moment was shared. The world outside our home still had dangers, still had people who could betray and manipulate, but we were ready. Together, we were unstoppable. Those who had tried to manipulate us, to gain control over him, were exposed. Their influence crumbled, quietly but irrevocably. The web of deception they had woven was destroyed, not with anger or revenge, but with patience, intelligence, and strategy. And yet, it wasn't just about the people outside. We had learned something even more important about ourselves, about trust, and about love. Silence had taught me patience. Observation had taught me awareness, and facing betrayal together had taught us both the strength of loyalty and unity. I realized then that life is rarely as simple as appearances suggest. A mansion doesn't guarantee happiness. Wealth doesn't guarantee safety. And even the most seemingly perfect relationships are vulnerable to hidden truths. But honesty, patience, and trust, those are unbreakable. In the weeks and months that followed, our lives found a new rhythm. We celebrated small victories quietly, shared our thoughts openly, and faced challenges with confidence. The silence that had once defined him was now replaced by understanding and connection. We were no longer living in fear of betrayal. We were living in the light of truth, and it was liberating. Every day was a new beginning, one where trust was no longer a fragile thread, but the foundation of everything we built together. Life has a way of teaching lessons in the most unexpected forms. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a whisper. Sometimes it hits hard, leaving scars and questions. And sometimes it comes in silence, a silence that hides truths, tests patience, and forces you to look deeper than you ever thought possible. I married a man who didn't speak. A millionaire, yes, but more than that, a man whose silence carried secrets, wisdom, and caution learned the hard way. At first, I saw it as a challenge, even a frustration, but over time, I realized it was a gift. Silence taught me to observe. Silence taught me to understand, to notice the small things, the details others overlook. And when betrayal entered our lives, that same silence became a shield, a guide for navigating a world full of deception. We learned that trust isn't given blindly. Trust is earned, tested, and proven. And patience isn't weakness. Patience is strength. Watching, waiting, observing, sometimes that is the most powerful response to manipulation and deceit. The world is full of people who might betray, manipulate, or deceive, sometimes intentionally, sometimes out of ignorance or self-interest. But the way you respond defines the outcome. You can react with anger, or you can respond with strategy, clarity, and composure. And love, real love, isn't about perfection. It's about understanding, loyalty, and navigating challenges together. My husband's silence taught me that words are powerful, but actions, patience, and trust speak louder than anything else. So, if there's one thing I want anyone listening to take away from our story, it's this: observe closely, trust wisely, protect your peace, and remember, the truth, when revealed, has the power to transform everything. Silence is not empty. Silence can be protective, instructive, even transformative. And sometimes the words you've been waiting to hear aren't just words. They're the key to understanding, clarity, and freedom. In the end, we were stronger not because we had wealth or luxury or appearances. We were stronger because we faced betrayal, uncovered the truth, and chose to act with intelligence, patience, and love. And that strength, that is what lasts.
Life often hides its lessons in silence, in moments we don't understand, in betrayals that shake us to our core. And yet, the truth, it always finds a way. Trust wisely, observe patiently, speak carefully. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, quietly, until the right moment. When the silence finally breaks, when honesty finally comes, everything changes. The doubts fade, the shadows lift, and you realize that the words you've been waiting for aren't just words. They're the key to clarity, freedom, and love. Every pause, every hidden truth, every test, it was preparing you for this moment. And now, with understanding, patience, and courage, you can step forward, unafraid, stronger than ever, ready to embrace life as it was meant to be.